1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Neil Armstrong, a name etched in the annals of history, is forever remembered as the first human to set foot on the surface of the moon.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But after walking into the history books, this man left the world a cryptic message that could upend all the course of history. And podcast kingpin Joe Rogan seems to have figured it out.
The problem with the videos of people on the moon is that there are videos that look 100% fake. Where guys fall forward and it looks like they get yanked up by wires. There's a lot of video that looks fake.
But what exactly did Rogan find out about the historical moon landing? What did he know? Is there some terrible truth being hidden from us? Join us as we dig deep into Joe Rogan's dissection of the message Neil Armstrong left before his death. Neil Armstrong's extraordinary life. First off, let's delve into the extraordinary life of Neil Armstrong and celebrate his remarkable contributions to humanity's quest for the stars. Neil Armstrong was born in Wapakoneta, Ohio, on August 5, 1930, to Stephen Koenig Armstrong and Viola Louise Engel. His fascination with flight began at an early age. Inspired by the pioneering aviators of his time, Armstrong dreamed of soaring among the clouds and beyond. He was a naval aviator from 1949 to 1952 and served in the Korean War. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering from Purdue University in 1955. A quick note, many years later, after he became world famous, he also received a Master of Science in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Southern California in 1970. Armstrong became a test pilot for NASA, then known as NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, and flew the X-15, a rocket-powered, missile-shaped aircraft that tested the limits of high-altitude flight. During his long career as a pilot, Armstrong flew more than 200 different aircraft, from jets to gliders and even helicopters. In 1962, Armstrong was selected to be part of NASA's second group of astronauts who flew on the two-seat Gemini missions to test out space technology and the three-seat Apollo missions that ultimately took 12 people to the surface of the moon. Armstrong's first flight was as command pilot of the Gemini 8 mission in March 1966, the sixth crewed mission of that series. Armstrong and pilot David Scott completed the first orbital docking of two spacecraft, joining their Gemini 8 spacecraft to an uncrewed Agena target vehicle. However, the two-man crew experienced a serious problem when a thruster on the Gemini 8 spacecraft became stuck open. With the astronauts whipping around faster than 1 revolution per second, Armstrong managed to gain control again by using the re-entry system thrusters. The event was the first serious emergency in space, and although the mission ultimately ended safely, the spacecraft was forced to splash down early because the re-entry system was already expended. Armstrong also narrowly avoided a nasty accident in May 1968, this time within Earth's atmosphere, while flying the Lunar Landing Research Vehicle, a machine that could fly somewhat like a lunar module and simulate landings on the moon. Fuel for the attitude thrusters ran out, and Armstrong was forced to eject just seconds before the vehicle crashed. NASA reported. Armstrong escaped unharmed. Apollo 11. First men on the moon. The year 1969 was an extremely important milestone, not only for Armstrong personally, but also for the whole world. That year marked an epic moment when the first person foot on the moon, and Armstrong walked into the history books. He changed the course of history as the commander of the Apollo 11 mission, landing humanity on another celestial body for the very first time and fulfilling President John F. Kennedy's goal of landing humans on the moon by the end of the decade and returning them safely to Earth.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone. and one we intend to win.
Launch on July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 was the culmination of the Apollo program and a massive national commitment by the United States to beat the Soviet Union in putting people on the moon. All told, 24 Apollo astronauts visited the moon and 12 of them walked on its surface. Additional NASA astronauts are scheduled to return to the moon by 2025 as part of the Artemis space program. From the time of its launch on July 16, 1969, until the return splashdown on July 24th, almost every major aspect of the flight of Apollo 11 was witnessed via television by hundreds of millions of people in nearly every part of the globe. The pulse of humanity rose with the giant, 111-meter-high, 3,038,500 kilograms Saturn V launch vehicle as it made its flawless flight from Pad 39A at Cape Kennedy, Florida, before hundreds of thousands of spectators. So accurate was the translunar insertion that 3 of the en route trajectory corrections planned were not necessary. Aboard Apollo 11 were Armstrong, Edwin, Buzz Aldrin, and command module pilot Michael Collins. Their enthusiasm was evident from the beginning as Armstrong exclaimed, "This Saturn gave us a magnificent ride. It was beautiful." The third stage of the Saturn then fired to start the crew on their 376,400-kilometer journey to the moon. The 3 astronauts conducted their transposition and docking maneuvers, first turning the command module, Columbia, and its attached service module around, and then extracting the lunar module from its resting place above the Saturn's third stage. On their arrival, the astronauts slowed the spacecraft so that it would go into lunar orbit. Apollo 11 entered first an elliptical orbit, 114 by 313 kilometers, and then a nearly circular orbit between 100 and 122 kilometers above the surface of the moon. On the morning of July 20th, Armstrong and Aldrin crawled from the command module through an interconnecting tunnel into the lunar module, Eagle. Toward the end of the 12th lunar orbit, the Apollo 11 spacecraft became 2 separate spacecraft: Columbia, piloted by Collins, and Eagle, occupied by Armstrong and Aldrin. By firing Eagle's propulsion system, the 2 astronauts changed from their nearly circular orbit to an elliptical course whose closest approach to the moon was only 15,000 meters. At this low point, they again fired their engine, this time to undergo the powered descent initiation maneuver. 5 times during the descent, the guidance computer triggered an alarm, called 1202 or 1201, that its memory was full, but NASA simulations before the mission showed that a landing could still happen despite the alarm, and thus Mission Control told the astronauts to continue the descent. At about 150 meters above the surface, Armstrong began maneuvering the craft manually, although the main engine continued under automatic control, to avoid landing in a rock-strewn crater. For about a minute and a half, Armstrong hovered Eagle, moving it laterally with the reaction control system until he found a clear area on which to descend. Then, the contact light went on inside the cockpit as the 172 centimeters probes dangling below Eagle's footpads signaled contact with the ground. 1 second later, the descent rocket engine was cut off as the astronauts gazed down onto a sheet of lunar soil blown radially in all directions. Armstrong then radioed at 4:17 p.m. U.S. Eastern Daylight Time. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Eagle had touched down in the Sea of Tranquility, an area selected for its level and smooth terrain. At 10:56 p.m., EDT Armstrong is ready to plant the first human foot on another world. With more than 500 million people watching on television, he climbs down the ladder and proclaims,
"One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
Aldrin joins him shortly and offers a simple but powerful description of the lunar surface: magnificent desolation. Armstrong took images of his descent. Armstrong had the responsibility to document the landing, so most of the images taken from the Apollo 11 mission were of Aldrin. While on the surface, the astronauts set up several experiments, collected samples of lunar soil and rock to bring home, erected a United States flag, and took core samples from the crust. They spoke with U.S. President Richard Nixon, whose voice was transmitted from the White House, and placed a plaque on the ground that stated, "Here, men from the planet Earth." First set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. "We came in peace for all mankind." The astronauts also laid down memorial medallions with the names of several astronauts and cosmonauts who had perished in flight and in training, including the Apollo 11 crew and the first person in space, Yuri Gagarin. They also left a 3.8-centimeter silicon disc with goodwill messages from 73 countries and the names of congressional and NASA leaders. Armstrong spent a little over 2.5 hours outside the Eagle. The astronauts traveled a total distance of about 1 kilometer as they walked around, traveling as far as 60 meters from the module to visit a large crater. They collected 21.55 kilograms of samples from the moon and reported that mobility on the moon was easier than anticipated. At 1:54 p.m., having spent a total of 21.5 hours on the moon, the lunar module blasted back to where Collins waited in the Columbia. The two vehicles docked, and the crew and samples transferred to the Columbia before the Eagle was jettisoned into space. The astronauts then headed back home. The team splashed down in the Pacific Ocean at 12:50 p.m. Eastern Time on July 24th, only a few miles from the recovery ship, the USS Hornet. After donning biological isolation garments, the crew left the Columbia and climbed into a rubber boat, where they were rubbed down with iodine in an effort to minimize potential contamination. They then traveled by helicopter to a mobile quarantine facility aboard the ship before being taken to Houston, where they remained in quarantine until August 10th. The men had completed the national goal set by President John F. Kennedy in 1961 to perform a crewed lunar landing and return to Earth. The conspiracy, moon landing, is a hoax. But while the moon landing is widely celebrated as a triumph of human ingenuity and technological capability, there are some individuals who doubt that it actually took place. These individuals, sometimes referred to as moon landing hoax theorists, claim that the moon landing was a staged event, staged by NASA as part of a larger government conspiracy. All began when Apollo 11 mission's pictures came close. Other intelligent and knowledgeable people of science and technology asked such questions that were not possible to ignore. And NASA also could not give a satisfactory answer to this question. The American public came under suspicion when it was revealed that the video and picture of the moon landing of Neil Armstrong, which the whole world saw on the TV screen, are no longer with them, and the samples of stone collected from the moon have also been lost. How can it be possible that the evidence of such a huge success of human data is erased so easily? Let's say it's not a big deal. It might have happened by mistake, but to date, no inquiry commission has been made in America. That how was the important evidence of such a huge success of human data lost? After this, a lot of questions were raised about the moon landing, and more people believed that the historic landing was just a hoax. The first person to spread the idea that the moon landing was faked was Bill Kaysing. Kaysing had actually contributed to the U.S. space program, albeit tenuously. Between 1956 and 1963, he was an employee of Rocketdyne, a company that helped to design the Saturn V rocket engines. In 1976, he self-published a pamphlet called "We Never Went to the Moon, America's $30 Billion Swindle," which sought evidence for his conviction by means of photocopies and theories, providing that the U.S. lacked the technical prowess to make it to the moon, or at least to the moon and back. Then, somehow, Kaysing established a few perennials that are kept alive to this day in Hollywood movies and Fox News documentaries, Reddit forums, and YouTube channels. As a result, despite the extraordinary volume of evidence showing the tracks made by the astronauts on the moon's surface, belief in the moon hoax conspiracy has blossomed, from a hunch, an intuition, to a true conviction. Even the podcast kingpin Joe Rogan is among the doubters. So too is the YouTuber Shane Dawson. A sociology professor in New Jersey was exposed for telling his students the landings were fake. But what exactly do moon landing hoax theorists believe? Well, in fact, the main argument of moon landing hoax theorists is that the footage of the moon landing is fake. They point to inconsistencies in the footage as follows. 1. Absence of stars. As you know, it is sure that there is no cloud on the moon. That's why it is very easy to see stars from the surface of the moon. But still, no star can be seen in the picture shown by NASA. How is it possible that despite having millions of stars in the sky looks black? We can easily see the stars even in the presence of a cloud from the Earth. But how is it possible that no star can be seen even though there is a clear atmosphere on the moon? In response to this question, NASA said that at that time the quality of the camera was not as good as it is today, therefore stars could not be captured on camera. Some people believe that the reason for not seeing stars in the picture that NASA could be caught lying due to the position of the stars. 2. More than one shadow of light. The sun is the only item of light in our universe, and when sun's light arrives on any object, so its only one shadow is divided in the same direction. But this is not the case in NASA's released photos and videos, that every object in the picture has different shadows. The reason for this was, of course, that a lot of lights would have been arranged during this scene. Whereas NASA said on this question that the reason for this is that the moon's surface is irregular. But this answer is not satisfactory. 3. The sea rock. There is another picture released by NASA in which the word sea can be seen clearly. This picture remained the topic of debate for many years. If this is not a big deal, but this word is written in a very clear and direct way. Therefore, human knowledge does not believe it to be written naturally on a stone. But the reality is, during film shooting, the directors of the film use this as a code to keep different things in their places. But accidentally during shooting the film, they kept this stone straight instead of upside down. And the word sea written here is safe in the camera. And there is no such stone on the moon, on which any word is written so clearly. 4. Waving flag. When Neil Armstrong took his step on the moon, he put the American flag on the moon. In the videos which NASA has presented, the flag is clearly seen waving. How is it possible to fly this flag while there is no wind on the moon? I have kept a piece of evidence of ABC News below. This is why the wave of the flag creates doubt in the human mind that did man really step on the moon, or was it just a pretense? 5. Existence of camera in real state. Due to no wind on the moon, the temperature reaches 150 degrees Celsius, while a high-to-high-quality camera also cannot record at 60 degrees Celsius. The camera affects the sensor due to heat, and its sensors become useless, while it can be recorded by making some necessary changes in the camera. But the interesting thing is that the camera that was recorded on the moon was an exhaust lens Hollywood camera, of which used of this on the moon without any change, which is impossible. So any ordinary camera cannot work because of the heat of the moon. 6. Foot penetration. On the moon's surface, we all know that there is no water on the moon, and where there is no water, legs never enter the ground. While in the photo shown by NASA, the leg can be seen penetrating the ground. 7. No one returned the moon. The last argument's moon landing hoax theorists often point to the fact that no one has been back to the moon since the Apollo missions, despite decades of technological advancement, as evidence that the moon landing was fake. Apart from this, there are many such questions and evidence. This gives rise to the doubt whether man really went to the moon, or was it just a drama? And as told, Joe Rogan is not the first person to doubt the moon landing hoax. Perhaps it was the many doubters before Joe that gave Neil Armstrong a guilty conscience. Perhaps he could not continue with the lie, hence the decision to step away from NASA. Armstrong resigned from the agency in 1971. From 1971 to 1979, he was a professor of aerospace engineering at the University of Cincinnati. Then from 1982 to 1992, Armstrong was chairman of Computing Technologies for Aviation, Inc. in Charlottesville, Virginia. Armstrong also participated in the Rogers Commission, which was a presidential commission tasked to look at the causes and events of the fatal Challenger shuttle explosion of January 28, 1986, that killed 7 astronauts. Armstrong chose to mostly stay out of the spotlight after leaving NASA, although he did reappear periodically for interviews or for anniversary events concerning Apollo 11. Although his public statements were few, he followed spaceflight news and occasionally made public comments on what was happening. He remained a vocal supporter of suborbital spaceflight. On the other hand, the former Apollo astronaut was publicly critical of plans to shift crewed spaceflight from NASA to private spacecraft. Death and legacy. On August 7, 2012, 2 days after Armstrong turned 82 years old, the famed moonwalker underwent coronary bypass surgery. Complications from the surgery resulted in his death on August 25th. His family wrote on the website neilarmstronginfo.com that Neil was our loving husband, father, grandfather, brother, and friend. For those who may ask what they can do to honor Neil, we have a simple request. Honor his example of service, accomplishment, and modesty, and the next time you walk outside on a clear night and see the moon smiling down at you, think of Neil Armstrong and give him a wink. Tributes poured in from many public figures, including President Barack Obama, Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney, then NASA Administrator Charles Bolden, Apollo 11 crewmates Aldrin and Collins, and various space representatives in the public, private, and non-profit spheres. Neil was among the greatest of American heroes, not just of his time, but of all time. When he and his fellow crew members lifted off aboard Apollo 11 in 1969, they carried with them the aspirations of an entire nation. They set out to show the world that the American spirit can see beyond what seems unimaginable, that with enough drive and ingenuity, anything is possible. Barack Obama. A private memorial service for Armstrong was held August 31, 2012, at the Camargo Club in Cincinnati. 2 weeks later, a publicly televised memorial service was held at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. Armstrong was buried at sea September 14, 2012, in a ceremony aboard the guided missile cruiser USS Philippine Sea. Armstrong's family was on board when the ship left port in Mayport, Florida, and they released his ashes somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Obama ordered flags around the United States to fly at half-staff on the day of the funeral. Although Armstrong is gone, his legacy lives on. In 2015, the Smithsonian Institution revealed that Armstrong had kept aside a cloth bag full of small parts from the lunar module Eagle, which lay undiscovered for decades until his widow, Carol, found it. While Armstrong made no mention of this bag in decades of interviews, the bag was discussed a few times during the mission. It is unknown how Armstrong ultimately gained possession of the bag, but it was common during the Apollo years for astronauts to retain souvenirs of their flights. A month after Armstrong's death, Obama made legal a bill to allow Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts to retain legal title to these mementos. Former Mythbusters host Adam Savage subsequently created a carry bag based on the design of Armstrong's purse. The design was actually used in several Apollo missions before and after Apollo 11. On July 21, 2009, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin attended the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Science and Technology tribute to the Apollo 11 astronauts at the Cannon House Office Building on Capitol Hill. During the ceremony, the committee presented the astronauts with a copy of House Resolution 607 honoring their achievements and announced the passage of legislation awarding them and John Glenn the Congressional Gold Medal. In a 2013 BBC documentary, Armstrong's brother Dean said that he knew of the famous first words on the moon several months before Apollo 11 touched down. And according to British newspaper The Telegraph, Dean reported that Armstrong passed him a handwritten note as the brothers played a late-night game of Risk. However, Dean's remarks contradicted many statements by Armstrong himself, who said that the words didn't come to him until he arrived on the moon. The other Apollo 11 astronauts have also backed up Armstrong's assertions. In 2017, a rare gold lunar model was stolen from the Armstrong Air and Space Museum in Wapakoneta, and according to Russell Hunlock, Wapakoneta police chief, entry to the museum was discovered and taken was a solid gold replica of the 1969 lunar excursion module that landed on the moon. The piece is very rare as it was presented to Neil Armstrong in Paris, France, shortly after the moon landing. On October 12, 2018, Universal Pictures released a Neil Armstrong biography based on James R. Hansen's book, First Man, The Life of Neil A. Armstrong. The movie starred Ryan Gosling as Armstrong. The movie was embroiled in political controversy because the filmmakers decided not to include a scene where Armstrong plants an American flag on the moon's surface, despite the fact that Armstrong did so in reality. Senator Marco Rubio, a Republican from Florida, tweeted, "This is total lunacy and a disservice at a time when our people need reminders of what we can achieve when we work together." At the Venice Film Festival, Gosling defended the filmmaker's choice, reported The Telegraph, saying, "I think the moon landing was widely regarded in the end as a human achievement, and that's how we chose to view it." On August 11, 2021, NASA dedicated the Ohio test facility to Neil Armstrong. Armstrong had graciously declined the honor when he was originally asked, but on Wednesday, August 11th, 9 years after Armstrong died, and a week after what would have been his 91st birthday, a group of NASA officials and members of Congress gathered at a small dedication ceremony in Sandusky, Ohio. NASA's Plumbrook Station is now known as the Neil A. Armstrong Test Facility. While Neil Armstrong and a bunch of great astronauts who joined Apollo missions of the 1960s and 70s left an indelible mark on history and inspiring generations to come, now, as the 21st century unfolds, a new chapter in lunar exploration is set to begin. In the coming years, mankind is poised to return to the moon in a manner not seen since the Apollo era. This time, however, the focus is not just on planting flags and collecting rocks, but on establishing a sustainable human presence that could pave the way for future missions to Mars and beyond. One of the most ambitious upcoming lunar missions is being spearheaded by an international coalition of space agencies and private companies. Their goal is nothing short of establishing a permanent lunar base, where astronauts can live and work for extended periods of time. This endeavor represents a significant leap forward in our understanding of how to live and thrive in the harsh environment of space, and it holds the promise of unlocking new opportunities for scientific discovery and technological innovation. The journey to the moon will not be easy. It will require overcoming countless technical challenges, from developing new spacecraft capable of carrying humans safely to and from the lunar surface, to devising innovative solutions for generating power and sustaining life in the vacuum of space. But if history has taught us anything, it is that humanity is at its best when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles. One of the key drivers behind this new wave of lunar exploration is the growing interest and investment from the private sector. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others have been at the forefront of developing new technologies and business models that could revolutionize the way we explore and exploit the resources of space. From reusable rockets to lunar landers capable of ferrying cargo and personnel to the moon and back, these companies are redefining what is possible in the realm of space exploration. But while the role of the private sector is undeniable, the importance of international collaboration cannot be overstated. The challenges of space exploration are too great for any one nation or company to tackle alone. By pooling our resources and expertise, we can achieve far more than we ever could working in isolation. Already, we are seeing the fruits of this collaboration in the form of joint missions and shared infrastructure. And as we look to the future, the possibilities are truly limitless. As for NASA, the agency has pushed back its timeline for the crewed Artemis missions that will send human beings to the moon. The first one, Artemis II, was supposed to take place later this year, but now it will launch in September 2025 to orbit the Earth's satellite, with the landing mission Artemis III now planned for a year later in September 2026. NASA said the Artemis IV mission to take humans to the Lunar Gateway space station in 2028 is still on track. NASA said that it is pushing the missions back primarily to make sure its crew is safe, as the agency needs to resolve a battery issue and work on circuitry related to environmental systems, including air ventilation. Of course, the journey to the moon is about more than just scientific and technological achievement. It is also about the human spirit of exploration and discovery. The moon has long captured our imagination as a symbol of the unknown, a frontier waiting to be explored. And while we may have visited before, there is still so much we have yet to discover. For the astronauts who will make the journey to the moon, it will be the culmination of a lifetime of training and preparation. But it will also be the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one in which the boundaries of what is possible are pushed ever further. As they gaze out at the lunar landscape from the surface of another world, they will carry with them the hopes and dreams of all humanity, inspiring future generations to reach for the stars. In the end, the upcoming attempt to reach the moon is about more than just planting flags and footprints. It is about forging a path to a future where the exploration of space is not just the domain of a select few, but a shared endeavor that unites us all in our quest to unlock the secrets of the universe. And as we embark on this journey together, we can only imagine what wonders await us on the lunar horizon.
That's all the information that we have for you today.
Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you never miss out on future episodes. And be sure to also tell us what you think about today's content. Everyone's support motivates us to continue delivering quality content and to always improve. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.